The battle over Vega Prime was supposed to be humanity's stand against annihilation, a rallying point for the remnants of the Terran Defense Armada. Instead, it became a graveyard. Captain Elias Drake stared out from the bridge of the TSV Resolute, his jaw clenched as waves of Chiron warships eclipsed the stars. The enemy moved with mechanical precision, their needle-like vessels slicing through the void. Every time the human fleet attempted to regroup, the Chiron's advanced AI would predict their maneuvers, countering with brutal efficiency. Explosions lit up the darkness like dying stars, and Drake's fleet, once humanity's pride, was reduced to burning wreckage. "Captain, the eastern flank is collapsing," Lieutenant Marat called out, her voice tinged with desperation. "We've lost contact with the Vanguard and Celestial Spear. They're gone." Ilias didn't respond. He couldn't afford to. Every second counted, and he had a duty to ensure as many survivors escaped as possible. He punched in coordinates on his console, overriding the autopilot. "All ships, retreat to the fallback point near Sirius," he commanded over the comms. "Prioritize civilian transports. The Chiron want a slaughter. We won't give it to them." The lieutenant's face crumpled with disbelief. "But the Council ordered us to hold the line." "The Council isn't here to see this massacre," Elias snapped. "We're done dying for their delusions." As the Resolute pivoted away from the carnage, Elias glanced at the tactical map. Red dots, representing the Chiron fleet, swarmed across the screen like a plague. He knew the fight was already lost, but retreating was just delaying the inevitable. Humanity couldn't keep running forever. Far below on Vega Prime's surface, amidst the crumbling remains of a once thriving colony, Dr. Alina Marvek worked furiously in a hidden bunker. Her fingers flew over holographic controls as her makeshift lab vibrated with the tremors of orbital bombardment. Alina wasn't a soldier, but she knew the stakes better than most. "We're running out of time," shouted her assistant, Jarek, a young engineer with soot streaked across his face. "Just a little longer," Alina muttered, her gaze locked on a pulsing fragment encased in a containment field. The artifact shimmered with an otherworldly glow, etched with alien runes that seemed to hum with latent power. The fragment was a piece of the Spear of Aeons, humanity's last hope. She'd spent years chasing myths and rumors across the galaxy, piecing together fragments of the weapon. But she needed more than just fragments. She needed a team, resources, and time. Time humanity didn't have. An explosion rocked the bunker, throwing Jarek to the floor. Alina stabilized herself against a console. The proximity alarms blared as Chiron dropships descended. "They found us," Jarek gasped. Alina grabbed the containment field and shoved it into her pack. "We need to get to the AVAC site. Now." As the bunker doors buckled under the weight of Chiron plasma cutters, Alina and Jarek bolted through a hidden escape tunnel. Above, the skies burned, but Alina held onto one thought. If the spear could be reforged, humanity might have a chance to strike back. But first, she had to survive. The underground city of New Arcadia was a testament to humanity's resilience, or, as many saw it, their inevitable decline. The dimly lit streets echoed with the sounds of hurried footsteps and the quiet hum of makeshift generators. The once proud capital of Earth had become little more than a refuge for the desperate and the broken. Alina and Jarek entered the city's central command complex, where scattered military leaders and engineers met in what could only be described as a last-ditch effort to hold onto something resembling hope. The doors slammed shut behind them, sealing off the outside world, and Alina set her pack down on a metal table. The fragment of the spear pulsed gently in the dim light, its alien glow casting strange shadows across the room. "Is that?" Lieutenant Jarek Porter, a hardened officer with the remnants of Earth's special forces, paused, eyes wide. "The spear?" Alina nodded grimly. "A piece of it." She carefully unpacked the device, setting it on the table. If we're going to survive this, we need to reassemble the spear. It's our only chance. Around the room, heads turned. Skepticism and fear hung heavy in the air. General Marcus Rell, once a leader of Earth's unified forces, stepped forward, his face lined with years of conflict. "That's a myth," he muttered, eyeing the fragment as if it might sprout teeth and attack. "You're telling me that tiny thing is the key to saving us?" Alina met his gaze without flinching. "It's not just a weapon. The Spear of Ahans was built using technology we can't begin to understand. Alien, yes, but powerful beyond anything we've ever seen. If we can rebuild it, we can destroy the Shiren's fleet. I've seen what it can do." "But you don't know how to rebuild it," General Rell interjected. "That weapon was shattered centuries ago. Even the ancient texts about it are unreliable." Jarek, who had been silently studying the fragment, interrupted. "There's a code embedded in the fragment, some sort of blueprint. I can translate it, but it'll take time." He looked to Alina. "It's not just a weapon, Marcus. It's a key to something much bigger." Rell hesitated. The room grew tense as everyone waited for his decision. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "You'll have your time, Dr. Marvek," he said, his voice hardening with reluctant resolve. "But you'll need more than just a fragment and a hopeful theory to fix this mess." He turned to the others. "Find her the resources she needs. You have 24 hours. After that, we move on to Plan B." Alina didn't flinch. "There's no Plan B." The urgency in her voice silenced the room. With a final glance at the spear's fragment, she turned and strode toward the makeshift command center. As she passed through the door, a technician intercepted her. "Doctor, you need to see this." The screen in front of her flickered, then displayed a live feed from Earth's orbital defense grid. The Shiren fleet, once thought to be fractured, was reforming. Hundreds, no, thousands of ships were converging on Earth's defenses, each one more terrifying than the last. Alina's heart sank as she saw the familiar silhouette of a Shiren warship, the flagship Empress of the Void, looming at the head of the formation. It was the same ship that had devastated Vega Prime. The Shiren were not just coming, they were bringing an armada. "They know what we're up to," Jarek muttered, his voice low. "They're coming for the spear." Alina clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. "Then we'd better be ready. No more running." The countdown had begun, and the fires of war were about to consume humanity once again. Alina stared at the flickering display as the Shiren fleet assembled in orbit. There was no more hiding. Humanity's last sanctuary was under siege, and every moment of delay meant more lost lives. The spear was their only hope, and to rebuild it, she needed more than just fragments. She needed access to ancient databases, military-grade tech, and resources scattered across the galaxy. Resources that were now only available in the darkest corners of space. "We can't do this alone," Alina muttered, her mind racing. "We need to find the rest of the spear and get back to Earth. We're out of time." Jarek was already preparing for the mission. "I've had a few contacts left on the black market, people who know how to find things. Rare things. But the price won't be cheap, and trust me, they'll want more than just money." Alina turned toward him. "Do whatever it takes. We can't afford to be picky." They gathered a team, a ragtag crew of survivors, thieves, and mercenaries, each with their own reasons for joining the mission, but all driven by a single goal: humanity's survival. First among them was Kellen, an exiled Shiren diplomat turned deserter, who claimed to know more about the spear's true nature than anyone else alive. The team was skeptical, but they had no choice but to trust him. "Let's make this quick," Kalen said, his reptilian eyes glinting in the dim light of the briefing room. "The Shiren will know we're coming, and they'll stop at nothing to prevent you from finding the rest of the weapon." "You keep saying that," Jarek muttered, his voice filled with doubt. "But we're talking about an ancient weapon scattered across the galaxy. We can't just go to the local pawn shop and buy the pieces." Kalen smirked, his sharp teeth catching the light. You'll need to think bigger than that. To find the spear's last fragment, you'll have to go to the heart of the old alliance. The ruins of Rhea IV. The planet was abandoned centuries ago after the Great War. Alina frowned. What's there? Why would the spear be on a dead world? Rhea IV was the location of the original forge, Kalen replied. The spear wasn't just built, it was born there. Whoever controls the forge controls the weapon. The tension in the room was palpable. A forge capable of creating weapons beyond human comprehension. And it was lost, forgotten in the wake of galactic wars. Alita's stomach churned at the implications. How do we get there? You'll need a ship, Kalen said, his tone shifting. And not just any ship, you'll need something fast. Something that can outrun Chiron pursuers. Jarek raised an eyebrow. You have a ship. Kalen gave a thin, humorless smile. I have more than that. I have a friend. A few hours later, the crew was gathered in the docking bay, staring at the vessel Kalen had promised. It was a rusted, battered freighter, a far cry from the sleek warships humanity once commanded. Its hull bore the scars of too many battles, and its engines hummed with a low, grating sound. But it was fast, and that's all that mattered. I hope your friend knows what they're doing, Alina muttered, studying the ship. Kalen led the way up the gangplank, his expression unreadable. Trust me, you'll want to meet her. Inside the ship, they were greeted by a woman who looked like she belonged in a different era. Tall, muscular, with piercing eyes that gleamed like she'd seen the universe burn and still walked through the ashes. This is Captain Lizora Dree, Kalen said, with a touch of respect in his voice. She's the best pilot in the galaxy. Lizora smiled, her lips curling into a grin that was both disarming and dangerous. If you can pay, I can fly. And if you can't, well, I'll take my payment in other ways. She eyed the crew, sizing them up. Welcome aboard the Storm Chaser. Try not to die on my watch. As the ship's engines roared to life, Alina's heart beat faster. This was it, the beginning of a journey that would take them to the furthest reaches of the galaxy, against enemies far stronger and smarter than they could ever anticipate. Yet, with the spear, they had a chance to fight back, to win. But they would have to survive long enough to piece it together. And as the Storm Chaser shot into the stars, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that something was already watching their every move. The Storm Chaser tore through the cold emptiness of space, its engines humming with a dull roar. The crew gathered in the dimly lit cockpit, watching as stars streaked by in blinding streaks of light. The journey to Rhea IV would take days, but every hour spent in the black void felt like a lifetime. Alina stood at the rear of the cockpit, studying the coordinates on a holographic display. The forge on Rhea IV was their only lead, and she couldn't afford any mistakes. The fragments they already had weren't enough to form the whole weapon. They needed access to the lost knowledge of the ancient forge. But with the Chiron fleet on their heels, time was quickly running out. You're too quiet, Doc, Jarek said, leaning against the doorway. What's on your mind? Alina glanced up at him. I'm thinking about what's waiting for us on Rhea IV. Kalen said the planet was abandoned after the war, but something tells me it's not as empty as we've been led to believe. You're not wrong, Kalen's voice came from behind her. The exiled Chiron had been unusually silent during the flight, his sharp gaze constantly scanning the instruments. The forge was abandoned because of what it became. Rhea IV's destruction wasn't just a war casualty, it was a deliberate erasure. Alina turned to face him. What do you mean, erasure? Kalen's eyes narrowed. When the forge was originally built, it wasn't just a place to craft weapons. It was a place of creation, of technology, biology, and even sentient life. The ancients didn't just make weapons, they made beings, designed for war, for control. And some of those beings never left. Jarek's eyes widened. You're saying there are creatures. Kalen's lip curled. Not just creatures, things. things that were shaped by the Forge, bound to it. They were the first to abandon the planet when the war turned against the creators. But they are still there, hidden in the ruins. The silence that followed was heavy. Alina could sense the tension building in the room. She hadn't considered that. Monsters created from the Forge's dark legacy. But they had no choice. They needed the Forge's secrets. Without it, their mission was doomed. "We'll deal with whatever's on that planet when we get there," Alina said, shaking off the unease that had begun to take root in her stomach. "We just need to find the rest of the spear, no matter what." As if on cue, a red light began flashing on the cockpit's control panel, accompanied by a shrill alarm. Lizora's voice came through the comms, calm and confident. "We've got company, folks. Chiron fighters on an intercept course. They'll be here in less than 5 minutes." Kaylin's sharp eyes flicked toward Alina. "I warned you. They know we're coming. They'll do anything to stop you from reaching Rhea IV." Alina's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to focus. The Chiron had already proven how ruthless they could be. They weren't just fighters, they were relentless, but they weren't expecting the Stormchaser to be the weapon it had become. Lizora's voice cut through the tension. "We'll outrun them, but we'll need to stay sharp. They're not just sending 1 or 2 ships, they are sending dozens. We'll need some serious speed." The ship's engines roared as Lizora manipulated the controls, pushing the Stormchaser to its limits. The fighters on their tail closed in quickly, their sleek black ships darting like venomous snakes through the void. Alina grabbed hold of a console as the ship swerved violently to the left. "Callan, any ideas on how to shake them?" Kaylin's lips parted in a tight grin. "I might be able to get us a little help, but it'll be risky." Before Alina could respond, the sound of whirring engines and sudden flashes of light interrupted her. The Stormchaser jolted forward as enemy fire began to pummel the shields. Lizora cursed under her breath. "Damn it, I don't have time to get us out of this cleanly." "Do it, Kaylin," Alina commanded. "Whatever it takes, we need to get past them." Kaylin stepped toward the tactical station, his fingers flying over the controls. "Hold on tight," he muttered. The Stormchaser shuddered again as it seemed to warp, its silhouette flickering in and out of existence. Alina's breath caught in her throat. "What the hell did you just do?" Jarek demanded. "I activated the cloaking device," Kaylin said, his voice calm, "but it won't hold long." The ship's faint outline became invisible, blending with the stars. The Chiron ships, unable to track their target, passed by in a furious chase, none the wiser that their prey had slipped through their fingers. For a moment, everything was still, but Alina knew the relief was only temporary. They had escaped this time, but the Chiron would not give up. They would be coming for them, soon, and when they reached Rhea IV, the real battle would begin. The silence aboard the Stormchaser was deafening as they slipped deeper into uncharted space. Lizora's hands remained steady on the controls, guiding them through the hidden void where Chiron scanners had no chance of finding them. The cloaking device, though powerful, was still a fragile shield, and Kaylin's warning echoed in Alina's mind. It wouldn't hold long. As they moved farther from the Chiron fleet, Alina allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but she knew better than to believe they were truly safe. The Chiron were relentless, and even if they'd evaded the immediate threat, it wouldn't be long before another wave of fighters came for them. They had to reach Rhea IV, and fast. "ETA to Rhea IV. 20 minutes, Lizora called out, her voice calm but taut with focus. "If we're lucky, we'll be able to land before they send another fleet to intercept us. But don't get comfortable. It's going to get rough." Jarek stood up from his seat and stretched, his eyes fixed on the distant stars outside. "I'm guessing we're not exactly landing on a tropical beach." Alina glanced at him. "No, Jarek. Rhea IV isn't a vacation spot. The planet's been abandoned for centuries, but if Kaylin's right, the Forge is still there, and with it, the last piece of the spear." Callan, who had been silently observing the control panels, spoke up. The forge won't be easy to find. It's buried deep within the planet, hidden beneath layers of rubble. If the planet's core wasn't so unstable, I would say it's entirely off the map. The core? Alina asked. Kalen's eyes flickered, a mixture of worry and calculation on his face. Yes, the planet's destruction wasn't just a result of war. It's unstable because the forge's technology, the power that created the spear, is still active beneath the surface. It's what caused the cataclysm. Whoever controls that forge can shape entire worlds. Alina's thoughts swirled. The spear wasn't just a weapon, it was a key to unimaginable power. A key that could either save humanity or doom them all. She had to be sure that whatever secrets lay in the forge were unlocked before the Shiren or anyone else could exploit them. I'll take my chances with that, Jarek said, his tone dark. But we still don't know exactly what's waiting for us on the surface. You've said it before, Callan, there are things there, things we're not prepared for. They are not just things, Callan replied, his voice low and dangerous. They are the creations of the forge, beings designed for war, for the destruction of entire civilizations. They are the last remnants of an ancient weapon that the creators of the forge no longer control. And they will kill anyone who tries to unlock its secrets. Alina shuddered, her grip tightening on the seat. So we're walking into a nest of ancient war machines. Great. Lizura glanced over her shoulder at them. I hope you're not planning on just walking in. We're going to need a solid plan once we're on the ground. The Storm Chaser won't be able to stay cloaked for long, and if we're spotted, that's it. We'll be on our own. We'll need to move quickly, Alina said, her voice firm with resolve. Once we land, we'll head straight for the forge. No detours, no mistakes. If the Shiren are going to be looking for us, we can't waste any time. Kalen's eyes glinted. And if they get to the forge before us, Alina's jaw tightened. Then we don't let them. The Storm Chaser began its descent toward Rhea IV, the planet's surface slowly coming into view. Despite its apparent desolation, there was something ominous about the way the darkened landscape stretched out before them. Volcanic ash billowed from the cracks in the planet's surface, and distant lightning flashed across the barren horizon. Hold on, Lizura warned, throttling the engines as the ship entered the atmosphere. The ship rocked violently as they broke through the thin layers of atmosphere, heading into the heart of the storm. Outside the cockpit window, Alina saw the looming shape of a shattered mountain range, jagged peaks that seemed to reach for the stars themselves. She knew that somewhere beneath those mountains, buried deep within the ruins, lay the forge, the spear's final fragment, and their last chance to save Earth. But as they descended, Alina's gut twisted. There was something else down there, something waiting, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their arrival had not gone unnoticed. Prepare for landing, Lizura said, her voice clipped. This is going to get rough. The Storm Chaser shook violently as it plummeted through the thick, turbulent clouds of Rhea IV. The planet's surface was a dark patchwork of charred ruins, jagged mountain ranges, and deep ravines that cut through the land like ancient scars. Below them, volcanic eruptions sent bursts of molten rock into the sky, lighting up the bleak landscape with fiery red glows. The air outside was thick with ash, and the atmosphere was so toxic that even the slightest exposure could prove fatal. We're almost through, Lizura shouted over the roar of the engines, her hands steady on the controls as she fought to maintain the ship's stability. The Storm Chaser rocked again, nearly sending Alina tumbling to the floor. Keep it steady, Alina barked, gripping the side of her seat to brace herself. Her heart pounded in her chest, the imminent threat of crashing combined with the heavy weight of their mission. Every second counted. They couldn't afford to be caught on this forsaken planet. Through the smoke and ash, Alina glimpsed the craggy mountains that loomed ahead, the place where they would have to land. Somewhere deep within those peaks, buried beneath centuries of devastation, lay the forge. She had to focus. There was no turning back now. Lizura's voice cut through her thoughts. I'm going in fast. We'll land just outside the mountains. Hope it's enough. The ship hurtled downward, the noise deafening. Alina could feel the ship's hull groaning under the pressure, the tremors rattling her bones. With a final violent lurch, the storm chaser hit the ground, its landing gears scraping against the cracked earth before it came to a sudden halt, kicking up clouds of dust and ash. We're down, Lizura said, breathing heavily. We've got maybe 5 minutes before we're spotted. Get the gear ready, Alina commanded, unstrapping herself from her seat and moving toward the cargo hold. Callan, you know the way to the forge. Lead the way. Callan stood silently, already moving toward the rear of the ship, his face a mask of grim determination. Stay close, all of you. The path to the forge is treacherous, and it's not just the terrain that'll kill you. Alina nodded, her mind already racing through the possible dangers. They had no idea what kind of defenses or creatures lurked in the shadows of the ruined forge, and time was not on their side. Every minute they spent on this planet was another minute the Shiren could use to track them down. The crew assembled in the cargo hold, suited up in protective gear to shield them from the planet's toxic atmosphere. Alina's mind was set. They had come too far to fail now. The hatch to the storm chaser opened with a hiss, and the group stepped out into the harsh landscape. The wind whipped the ash into their faces, but Alina barely felt it. Her focus was entirely on the jagged mountain range ahead. There, buried under layers of destruction, was the key to saving Earth and the galaxy itself. Callan led them through the ruins, his movements swift and sure. The rest of the crew followed closely, weapons ready, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. The air was eerily still. The only sound was the crunch of their boots on the brittle, rocky ground. As they moved deeper into the shattered landscape, a sense of unease settled over Alina. The planet was dead, there was no question about it, but something felt wrong. There's no sign of life, Jarek muttered, his voice tight with suspicion. Nothing's moved, it's too quiet. I told you, Callan replied, his voice low. The forge isn't just a place, it's a sentient place. It's aware of who comes and who goes. A cold shiver ran down Alina's spine. She had thought the forge was just a relic of the past, but now she understood. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a force, something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. They rounded a corner, and the mountains loomed even larger before them. The path grew steeper, the rocks sharper. It was clear that the forge was buried deep within this treacherous landscape. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. The faint sound of something shifting beneath the earth reached their ears, and then a low, guttural growl echoed through the air. Something's coming, Callan said, his eyes narrowing. Get ready. Alina's heart skipped a beat. Whatever was buried on this planet had been waiting for them, and it was not pleased that they had arrived. Move, Alina shouted, as the ground cracked open with a deafening roar. Massive, dark shapes began to emerge from the depths, creatures formed of shadows and broken rock, their eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. They were not just guardians of the forge. They were its defenders, and they would kill anyone who dared to trespass. The creatures emerged from the depths with a speed and ferocity that left Alina no time to think. Massive, shadowy figures, half formed from the earth itself, surged toward them, their glowing eyes blazing with ancient hatred. The ground rumbled beneath their feet, the very planet seeming to awaken to their presence. These were no ordinary predators. They were the forge's guardians, silent, relentless, and deadly. Alina drew her weapon, her pulse quickening. The creatures were made of rock and shadow, their bodies shifting and changing with every movement. Their limbs were long, jagged, and impossibly strong, like the claws of an ancient beast. They weren't just constructed from the earth, they were the earth, and they moved with terrifying purpose. Fire, Alina shouted, her voice barely audible over the shrieking winds and the roars of the creatures. Jarek didn't need to be told twice. He opened fire, the first blast striking the nearest creature in the chest, but the shot barely slowed it. The monster's rocky hide absorbed the impact like it was nothing, and with a deafening roar, it charged forward, swiping at them with its enormous claws. Lizora dodged just in time, her agility saving her from a crushing blow. She fired another shot, this one aiming for the creature's glowing eyes, but the projectile ricocheted off its obsidian-like skin. "These things are tough," she yelled, retreating to get a better angle. "They were designed for war," Kalen replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "This isn't just a guardian, they were built to fight armies." Alina's mind raced as she fired her weapon, trying to find a weak point. There had to be something. She couldn't afford to waste time. The path to the forge was right in front of them, but with every passing second, the creatures seemed to multiply. They were swarming them, encircling them, herding them toward the jagged cliffs at the edge of the mountain. "We need to move," Kalen shouted, grabbing Alina's arm and pulling her back toward a narrow fissure in the rock. "The forge is close, but we can't fight them all. We'll be overwhelmed if we stay here." Reluctantly, Alina followed, leading the team as they darted toward the crack in the mountain. It was their only chance, but the creatures were closing in, their growls rising in pitch, and one of them lunged at Jarek, knocking him to the ground. "Jarek," Alina yelled, spinning around, her heart racing as she saw him struggling beneath the weight of the creature. Without thinking, she rushed to him, her weapon raised to fire. But before she could get a clean shot, a loud crack echoed through the air. The creature's body went limp, and it fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Jarek scrambled to his feet, breathing heavily. He glanced up at Kalen, who had his rifle trained on the fallen beast. "Get moving," Kalen barked, not giving them a moment to breathe. The team wasted no time, charging toward the narrow path Kalen had pointed out. The creatures were relentless, but now, at least, they were focused on the larger group, giving Alina and the others a brief window to escape. The rock formations surrounding the fissure shielded them from the worst of the attacks, but the ground beneath their feet trembled with every strike. They sprinted forward, deeper into the mountain, the air growing colder as they descended. The dark shadows of the creatures followed, their glowing eyes glinting like fireflies in the pitch black. The farther they went, the more it felt as though the mountain itself was closing in on them, an ancient, sentient tomb that would bury them if they faltered. Almost there, Kalen muttered, his voice grim but determined, "Just a little farther." Alina could feel it too. The forge was close. The air had changed, thick with a strange energy, as though the planet itself was alive and watching them. Every step they took felt like they were crossing into something forbidden, something that had been lost to time and should have remained forgotten. They rounded a final bend, and there it was, the forge. The enormous structure stood before them, an imposing monolith of black stone and shimmering energy, half buried in the rock. Its surface pulsed with an eerie light, and the air around it crackled with power. The forge itself was a living monument, its very presence radiating a sense of deep, unfathomable strength. "This is it," Kalen whispered. "The spear's final piece is inside." But even as he spoke, the ground beneath them began to quake, and a guttural, bone-chilling roar echoed through the mountain. Alina spun around. The guardians were closing in, and the path to the forge was now completely blocked. They were trapped. "Get to the forge," Alina shouted. Now, the moment Alina shouted, the world seemed to shudder in response. The ground trembled violently, and the mountain itself seemed to groan, as if aware of what they intended to do. The guardians were closing in, their dark forms moving with a terrifying speed, their glowing eyes locked onto their prey. They weren't just protecting the forge, they were ensuring that no one would ever awaken its power again. "Move," Alina urged, her voice desperate. Kalen led the way, charging toward the enormous structure of the forge. The crackling energy in the air grew stronger as they neared. the pulse of the forge becoming an almost tangible force, vibrating through the soles of their boots. Alina felt the energy surging, responding to their presence, but she couldn't dwell on that now. They had no choice but to get inside. Jarek fired off a few shots behind them, trying to slow down the creatures that had begun to swarm them again. The blasts hit the Guardians, but the creatures barely faltered. They were relentless, their bodies seemingly impervious to the weaponry. "Get to the entrance," Kalen shouted, voice full of urgency. They reached the massive doorway of the forge, its surface smooth and seemingly impenetrable, like a wall of ancient obsidian. But as they approached, the energy pulsed, and a section of the door slowly slid open, revealing an interior bathed in the same eerie, pulsating light. Alina wasted no time. She shoved past the others, rushing into the dark interior of the forge. The moment she crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening thud, and the pulsing energy intensified. Inside, the air was thick with power, swirling around them like a storm. The walls were covered in intricate alien runes that seemed to shift and change with every glance. The forge was alive in a way Alina had never imagined, an ancient consciousness embedded in the very structure of the device itself. Alina's breath caught as she stepped deeper into the heart of the forge. In the center of the chamber was an altar, surrounded by a series of glowing mechanisms and strange alien tools. Above it, hovering in the air, was the spear, the final piece. It was a relic of unimaginable power, its form sleek and elegant, made of a metal that shimmered with an otherworldly light. "That's it," Kalen whispered, his voice reverent. Alina nodded, stepping forward, her heart racing. The spear wasn't just a weapon, it was the key to humanity's survival. With it, they could destroy the Shiren once and for all, ending the war that had ravaged the galaxy. But there was no time to waste. They had to act before the Guardians broke through the forge's defenses. A rumble echoed from outside. The Guardians were battering the entrance, determined to break through. "I'll need your help," Alina said, turning to Kalen. "We need to activate the forge, power the spear." Kalen nodded, stepping forward to help her. As the team worked quickly, setting the pieces in place and activating the ancient mechanisms, the forge hummed to life. The air vibrated with raw energy, and the spear began to glow brighter, its power growing exponentially. Then, suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the spear, engulfing the chamber. Alina shielded her eyes, her heart pounding. She felt the power surge through her, through all of them, like a current of pure destruction, ready to be unleashed. "The Shiren won't know what hit them," Alina muttered under her breath, her hands trembling as she reached for the spear. But as her fingers brushed against it, a sharp, piercing scream filled the air, one that seemed to resonate from the very core of the forge itself. The Guardians were almost upon them. Their time had run out. With one final, desperate push, Alina grasped the spear. The entire chamber trembled as the forge's energy surged outward, and the world around them seemed to collapse into a single unified point of focus, the weapon that would change everything. Outside, the Guardians roared in fury as the light from the spear reached its peak. The forge had awakened fully, and with it, the shattered spear had been reforged. The final battle for the galaxy had begun. Alina turned to Kalen, her eyes filled with determination. "It's done. Now, let's finish this." As the sound of the Guardians' approach grew louder, they made their way to the forge's exit, the spear humming in Alina's hands, ready to strike down the enemies of humanity. They had fought for this moment, and now, with the power of the forge at their backs, they would take the fight to the Shiren, and they would win. The battle for the future of the galaxy had only just begun.